Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7 o'clock main news. In tonight's headlines, the National Assembly approves a number of draft laws and amendments and postpones others to the upcoming session. The Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs meets with a UN delegation over the humanitarian situation of Syrian refugees. The US Secretary of State says there must be regional unity to expel militants who have taken large swaths of northern and western Iraq. And a security officer is killed and at least 20 people are injured in a suicide car bombing in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. The National Assembly held its ordinary session today under the chairmanship of Parliament Speaker Marzouk Ali Al-Ghanem. During the sessions, MPs discussed several important issues and approved 3 draft laws that have now been referred to the government for approval. Sarah Glubb was at the National Assembly with the details.
During its regular session, the National Assembly unanimously approved the health insurance law for retired Kuwaiti citizens in its first and second deliberations. The National Assembly also approved the amendment of Law 14 of the year 1973 on establishing the Constitutional Court. The draft law states that a natural or legal person has the right to file suit before the Constitutional Court to contest laws and regulations on grounds that they violate the Kuwaiti Constitution. Moreover, the Parliament approved a Memorandum of Understanding between Kuwait's government and the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, on establishing a centre dedicated to the International Fund for Economics and Financing in the Middle East.
Well, today we discussed several issues, and also we reached the final decisions and the votes in the major issues like for the rights for the citizens to have the rights to have their cases in the Constitutional Court, and also discussed also the health insurance primarily for retired people. And this is one major issue, and we hope that we discuss it also. We include children and other handicapped people also with health insurance. And also we discussed today, we postponed the BOT for next session, and also for the the final, or what they call it. Also we discussed the ONDB issues of the Kuwaiti government, and we discussed also the salary of the final 18 months for the people who reach the retirement age. It's not happened before. We discussed this much of issues at the same time. So I think we did a great job today with the council and the assembly, and also the government, to reach all of these issues.
On the other hand, Parliament postponed voting in its first deliberation on a draft law granting indemnity for civilian and military employees and those working in state-owned companies to the upcoming session, which is due next Monday. In the same context, the National Assembly postponed the voting in its second deliberation of the draft law on establishing a partnership between the public and private sectors to the next session, which will also discuss the differences and amendments proposed on it. Regarding retirement severance packages and the BOT laws, the National Assembly has referred the issue to the relevant committees and will vote on it on the draft laws in its next session on Monday. As for the Kuwaiti stock market, deliberations are still ongoing regarding the draft law. However, amendments have been made to Article 7 and they have been approved, allowing the Board of Directors a membership of 4 years rather than the previous 5. For the past consecutive sessions, members of Parliament have been discussing the issues related to the Constitutional Court and citizens filing complaints, as well as the stock market. But in this session, they approved issuing health insurance for the Kuwaiti citizens that have reached retirement age, and among other issues that will also continue deliberations in their complementary session tomorrow, as well as in their continued sessions next week. From the National Assembly building, this is Sarah Gleb reporting for English News.
The Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs, Sheikh Salman Sabah Salim Mahmoud Al-Sabah, met with a UN delegation yesterday at his office. During the meeting, the UN officials appreciated the role of Kuwait, headed by His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, in all the humanitarian assistance to Syrian refugees and displaced population inside and outside Syria. Here is more on the meeting in this report prepared by Salim Al-Kindari.
The Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs, Sheikh Salman Mahmoud Al-Sabah, met with UN officials last night in his office discussing the latest developments in regards to the Syrian crisis. Imran Riza, a UNHCR regional representative to the GCC countries, said Kuwait played a major role to help alleviate the sufferings of the Syrian refugees.
This trip this time is very much to discuss with key interlocutors at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and at the Ministry of Information how to continue this very good partnership that we have had. Kuwait, of course, as we all know, has had two very important international conferences. These have been key. These have been essential to trying to mobilize the international community to come out and assist in the tragedy of Syria, of trying to save lives in Syria. And what the State of Kuwait and His Highness the Emir has done in these two conferences is not only on the one side try to get everyone together to strategize to work towards helping alleviate the suffering, but also to give so generously from the State of Kuwait. So we look around the world right now. We look at all the crises. We look at how big the Syria crisis has become. We see the numbers expanding. If we didn't have assistance like this, a lot more people would be dying. A lot more people would be in a very, very difficult situation. So the assistance that we've received from Kuwait is really, truly life-saving. It has saved many, many lives. We're also here to talk to our counterparts and thank them for what they're doing bilaterally, because Kuwait has always, for a long time, supported a lot of the countries that are affected, whether Lebanon or Jordan, who are two of the countries most affected by this. Kuwait has always bilaterally helped them in a very big way. And now their populations are under a great deal of pressure. So again, all this effort, I think, from the State of Kuwait, which is of course a very small country, but a very generous country, and it has been under the leadership of course His Highness the Emir. And I think that's also very much the reason why he was recognized by the Secretary General as this great humanitarian. Kuwait has done all of this on principles of humanitarianism. It has not been anything political, it has not been anything otherwise. It has been very simply in a humanitarian spirit to help what we see as the people most in need right now. Whatever we do on the humanitarian side is basically a band-aid. It is a small thing. As much effort as we put into it, unless there is a political solution found, unless there is the will for a political solution, we will continue having to do what we're doing right now, which is put band-aids here and there. The scale of it is so big that we need a very strong partnership. And what we will need to do is continue to provide as much assistance as we can. We will need to continue to try to make sure children do not lose their futures, that they are educated, that they are protected. We will need to continue to try to make sure that the host communities that are in countries like the Lebanese, the Jordanians, etc., who are hosting all these refugees are assisted. We will need to continue to try and find access to all the internally displaced inside Syria that are suffering so strongly.
For his part, Daniel Andrus, Director of External Relations Divisions at the UN, thanked Kuwait for its massive contributions that amounted to $4.6 billion during the two pledging conferences for Syria held in Kuwait.
First of all, we are facing the greatest humanitarian tragedy of our times, the greatest since World War II, and it is of such magnitude that it is absolutely important that the world sticks together and helps the most needy people, that is the refugees from Syria and the internally displaced from Syria, and provides all the help we can. Kuwait is a leader in humanitarian aid, and above all, the Amir has led the way in helping the Syrian people who are facing this tragedy. And we have closely collaborated with Kuwait on bringing assistance and life-saving assistance to millions of people, thanks to the great and generous support of Kuwait. Kuwait has also been the leader in mobilizing the world for the Syrian people. This is extremely important because Kuwait Conference number 1 and Kuwait Conference number 2 provided the platform, but also provided the rationale and the reason why the world had to engage in the greatest humanitarian tragedy which we are facing today. And that has been an incredible success and has been recognized worldwide.
The UN officials noted that as many as 100,000 Syrians sought refuge in neighboring countries only this month, highlighting the importance of continuous efforts for contributions and cooperation. From the Ministry of Information, this is Salim Kandari reporting for the English News.
Iraqis in the capital Baghdad said that they expect the US to take a central role in combating militants who have taken over swaths of the country. It comes as US Secretary of State John Kerry met with President of Iraq's Kurdish region Masoud Barzani today, pushing the central government in Baghdad to adopt new policies that would give more authority to Iraq's minority communities. President Barzani said Kerry was confronting an enormous challenge in seeking a multi-sectarian government in the country. But the US believes a new power-sharing agreement in Baghdad would soothe anger directed at the government by the militant group.
And the government formation challenge is the central challenge that we face. In recent days, the security cooperation between the forces here in the Kurdish area have been really critical to helping to draw a line with respect to ISIL and also to provide some support to the Iraqi security forces.
Various opposition factions and the Syrian government reached a ceasefire deal in the besieged Palestinian Yarmouk refugee camp in Damascus. Syrian officials said the latest deal had been sponsored by the Syrian government and the Palestine Liberation Organization, who agreed on opening the main entrances to the camp and restoring all basic services in it. Under the agreement, heavy weapons are to be removed from the camp, barriers are to be taken down, and an internal force is to be created to guarantee security. Meanwhile, the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, or the UNRWA, welcomed the ceasefire agreement and said it's urgently seeking the immediate resumption and expansion of its humanitarian activities in the camp. Security officials and the Lebanese Red Cross said a security officer was killed and at least 20 people were injured in a suicide car bombing in the capital, Beirut. Security officials said the suicide bomber drove an old red Mercedes the wrong way down the street before blowing up the vehicle, causing a huge fire. They added that the blast took place just after midnight outside a cafe near a Lebanese army checkpoint where people had gathered to watch the World Cup matches. This was the second explosion in a week and comes amid mounting regional tensions over dramatic events in nearby Iraq, where militants have seized large chunks of territory in the country's north and west. Australia summoned the Egyptian Chargé d'Affaires Sharif Badir Hussein in Canberra today to make an official objection to the sentencing of Australian journalist Peter Grest in a Cairo court. Meanwhile, in New York, the UN voiced deep concern over this week's sentencing in Egypt. Spokesman Stefan Jurajek said that UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon objected to the confirmation of death sentences for 183 people, as well as the sentencing of journalists to lengthy jail terms. Grest was one of 3 Al Jazeera journalists sentenced by a Cairo court yesterday to at least 7 years in prison on charges stemming from an interview with the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. The verdict has brought international condemnation and calls for the newly elected President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to intervene. Cameroon's military arrested 40 suspected Boko Haram militants in the north of the country. Soldiers also sealed off a market where they suspect Boko Haram may be hiding arms for use in the insurgency over the border in Nigeria. Leader of the military raid, Colonel Naye Mekpierre, ordered the military action as part of its fight against Boko Haram incursions into Cameroon. Northern Cameroon recently saw an influx of refugees and militants from the neighbouring Central African Republic and the Boko Haram violence in northern Nigeria. Officials suspect the militants are attempting to recruit members from within the country. Authorities in Cameroon are urging citizens along the border to cooperate with the government by providing information on the militia group. Storms lashed the eastern Australian states of New South Wales and Victoria today, with high winds toppling trees in Melbourne and heavy snow falling in mountainous areas. In Melbourne, storm surges flooded low-lying areas near the Yarra River. Trees were uprooted, damaging homes and cars, and the high winds downed power lines, cutting electricity to 77,000 homes. Following a mild start to winter, snow blizzards swept across towns today, bringing heavy falls and relief to business owners. Officials recorded that temperatures plummeted to minus 20 degrees Celsius on the highest slopes. The first international briefing meeting on the link between diabetes and TB in the Gulf was recently held at Dasman Diabetes Institute. The 2-day event was organised in collaboration with the International Centre for Migration, Health and Development, known as the ICMHD. Hiba Abdurrahman was there and has this report.
The Dasman Diabetes Institute, or the DDI, in collaboration with the International Center for Migration, Health and Development, known as ICMHD, held their first international meeting to discuss the link between diabetes and TB in the Gulf region. The meeting aimed to sensitize health professionals towards this link and to promote a better awareness of the steps that are needed in terms of research, screening, diagnosis and treatment.
I don't need to dwell on the importance of this meeting. You're all familiar with the immense challenges the world is facing with respect to diabetes. Kuwait is among the most seriously affected countries, and our national health authorities are giving the prevention and treatment of diabetes their highest priority. The establishment of Dasman Diabetes Institute is a testimony to this and to our commitment to making sure that Kuwaiti's response to diabetes epidemic is a solid and scientific-based one.
This event is to look at the association between TB and diabetes. It's been shown in many other parts of the world that diabetes increases the risk of getting active TB disease, tuberculosis disease, by about threefold. So that's a very sizable, very large, strong association between TB and diabetes. That means WHO guidelines now recommend screening all TB patients for diabetes, and in some settings it may be of benefit to screen diabetes patients, at least with symptoms, for active TB as well, to screen and treat. So the association has a lot of implications for screening and also for enhanced treatment. It may be, for example, that improved glycemic control amongst TB patients with diabetes would improve TB treatment outcomes and also diabetes outcomes as well.
Diabetes has become one of the most serious and widespread diseases in the world, and TB is rapidly re-emerging in many countries. It has long been known that a psychological link between TB and diabetes exists. However, it was not until recently that this link was recognized as a serious public health issue. From the Desman Diabetes Institute, this is Hiba Abdulrahman reporting for English News.
The three main indices of the Kuwait Stock Exchange ended the trading session with a negative performance as the price index lost 36 points to reach 6,936 points. The KSX 15 index also lost 4 points and settled at the level of 1,143 points. The share of Tamdeen Real Estate Company was the top gainer of the day, while that of Al Ghurain Holding Company was the top decliner. After yesterday's decisive 2-0 win against Chile, the Netherlands is the first team entering the second stage of the World Cup. Brazil also secured its position in the next stage with a 4-1 victory against Cameroon. Mexico unilaterally defeated Croatia with a final score of 3-1. Spain beat Australia 3-0, leaving both teams at the bottom of Group B table and out of the running. The first matches of the second stage lineup will see Brazil go head-to-head with Chile and the Netherlands play against Mexico. Group D's final standings will be decided today, with Italy set to play Uruguay and England will battle it out with Costa Rica. Colombia will face Japan and Greece is up against the Ivory Coast to cement the team's positions in Group C. For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. And to recap tonight's news, here are the headlines once again. The National Assembly approves a number of draft laws and amendments and postpones others to the upcoming session. The Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs meets with a UN delegation over the humanitarian situation of Syrian refugees. The US Secretary of State says there must be regional unity to expel militants who have taken large swaths of northern and western Iraq. And a security officer is killed and at least 20 people are injured in a suicide car bombing in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Thank you for joining us.